Okay, so Joe Biden did an exclusive interview with ABC where he was interviewed by Mr. George Stephanopoulos. This interview was absolutely horrendous. The questions were awful. The framing of the questions were awful. Take a look at this excerpt that I got, and then we'll talk about it.
When you look at what's happened over the last week, was it a failure of intelligence, planning, execution, or judgment?
Look, I don't think it was a fair. Look, it was a simple choice, George. When the Taliban, let me put it another way. When you had the government of Afghanistan, the leader of that government getting in a plane and taking off and going to another country, when you saw the significant collapse of the Afghan troops we had trained, up to 300,000 of them, just leaving their equipment and taking off. That was, that's what happened. That's simply what happened.
But we've all seen the pictures. We've seen those hundreds of people packed into a C-17. We've seen Afghans falling.
That was 4 days ago, 5 days ago.
What did you think when you first saw those pictures?
What I thought was we have to gain control of this. We have to move this more quickly. We have to move in a way in which we can take control of that airport. And we did.
So you don't think this could have been handled, this actually could have been handled better in any way? No mistakes?
No, I don't think it could have been handled in a way that we're going to go back in hindsight and look, but the idea that somehow there's a way to have gotten out without chaos ensuing, I don't know how that happens. I don't know how that happened.
So for you, that was always priced into the decision?
Yes.
Now, first and foremost, I would like to apologize for forcing you to watch that dribble because that's exactly what it was, but it had to be done. Now, firstly, allow me to say, I finally understand what people mean when they talk about, the media's influence and how big the media was propagating the American people and how they, just their overall influence on us going into Iraq. Now, I was too young to have any kind of recollection of what the media was like during the height of the Iraq War. I was so young I couldn't even formulate an opinion on it, or an accurate opinion on it, much less even be aware of that, be aware of the fact that that was occurring at the time. But I understand now with the U.S. pulling out of Afghanistan what that may have looked like, because what we're seeing right now from corporate media and the various pundits and news hosts all the way across the spectrum, from Fox News to Newsmax to CNN to MSNBC, everything. I mean, it's absolutely terrible, and they're all aligned with one motive and one ideology, and that's to push propaganda to the American people that us pulling out of Afghanistan is the worst thing in the world right now. And they're not even giving valid reasons anymore. They're just pulling stuff out of their ass at this point. Like, oh, the women, or, I don't know, this lady's cat may die. It's absolutely ridiculous things that they're coming up with. So George Stephanopoulos here, notice the first question that he asked to Biden there. He says, was it a failure of, he's referencing, Joe pulling out of Afghanistan. Was it a failure of intelligence, planning, execution, or judgment? Notice the framing of that question. Notice the scope of conversation, the bounds of conversation that he just delegated for them to speak within. They're speaking within the bounds of it being a failure. He prematurely declared this a failure. While he staged the question, while he proposed the question, he says, oh yeah, it's a failure, but what kind of failure is this? So pulling out of Afghanistan itself, to all of establishment media, all of corporate media, is a failure because they didn't want to leave and they don't want to ever leave, no matter what kind of reason they give you. Oh, well, no, it's not that we're leaving. It's the way that we leave. Maybe we should stay 2 extra years. Or all of it's bullshit, because whether we stay 2 years, 10 years, however long, the result would have been the same. Now, there are reasonable criticisms to make of this move, but they're not laying those criticisms out. And one of the most stark criticisms would be the refugee situation. Okay, I've heard numbers up to 90, maybe even 100,000 people that were aiding the U.S., while they were in Afghanistan, different interpreters and their families and just close allies. Okay, once you add all those people up, it's between 90 to 100,000 of them. And 90 to 100,000 of them hasn't made it over here to the U.S. In fact, it's a number insanely less than that. And that's a very reasonable criticism to make, but they aren't making those criticisms, okay? They're just deeming it a failure, and they're asking him what kind of failure it is. And then Joe makes a reasonable response. He gives reasons X, Y, and Z. The leader took off on a plane. He didn't mention the fact that the leader took off with all the dough. The army that they trained up, 300,000 Afghan troops, just laid down, ran away, didn't do anything, didn't fight back. They lost their will to fight, essentially. And corporate media will look at that and they will say that he's giving, quote unquote, excuses and that he's blaming others when, in fact, and I hate doing this, I hate making it seem like I'm coming out in defense of Biden, somebody that I have a ever so growing disdain for on every single other day of the week, but they're putting me in this position. He came out himself and owned it and said that, yeah, no, I did this and I'm owning this. How is that blaming anybody else? How is that casting blame or making excuses? How can you make excuses for pulling out of a war anyway? To me, that makes no sense at all. And then he asked him, have you seen the pictures? Have you seen the pictures? What'd you think about the pictures? I mean, this guy, these people have no shame to ask these kind of questions. Yeah, everybody's seen the pictures, man. What are you going to fly down to Afghan to help those people? What are you going to do? I'm very confused how they have this preconceived notion. It's like stapled into their brains that we as America have the right to meddle in other countries' affairs. The thing is that people are ignoring that we shouldn't have been there in the first place. I mean, that's the thing that nobody's going to tell you. Why did we go into Afghanistan? The imperialists will tell you, oh, we went in there so we could crush, so we could find Osama bin Laden. He was killed in Pakistan, by the way. Or so we could get Al-Qaeda. Okay, well, 15 of the 19 bombers from 9/11 were from Saudi Arabia. And if you look up where the other people are from, you'll get places like Egypt, Lebanon, the United Arab Emirates, places like that. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. So you have to ask yourself again, okay, well, why did we go in there? Well, if there's statistics, and I don't have it in front of me, so I can't put it on the screen, but the military contractors, the military industrial complex, placed things like industries like Raytheon, Boeing, etc., Lockheed Martin. They've made a lot of fucking money over the course of these 2 decades that we've been in Afghanistan, and that's not a secret. But mainstream media isn't going to tell you that, and they're pushing endless propaganda. And what they're doing is they're actually being successful right now and swaying the minds of American people. And now they have people thinking that, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't pull out when they otherwise would have believed, like, okay, yeah, of course, bring the troops home. I mean, that's how effective they are. That's how effective mainstream media is. And I can't help but think that it was just like this, if not even worse, during the height of the Iraq War. And Joe Biden points out how, they took control of the airport, which is a good thing. I mean, you can't argue with that. Secure the place that the troops have to pass through so they can get home. So he sent troops in, not to fight the Taliban, but to, make sure that, the troops could get home safely. Good move there. And I love this question. He says, couldn't this have been handled with no mistakes? You want me to tell you why that question is a load of bullshit? Because what do you do? That depends. What do you define as a mistake, Mr. George? What's a mistake to you? Oh, that's right. A mistake to him and all of mainstream media is pulling out of Afghanistan in the first place. They never wanted to leave. And they never want to leave. They want to stay there forever, no matter what they tell you. Jake Tapper, all these other fucking idiots on CNN and MSNBC and whatever else, they never want to leave. And they're just towing the line for the establishment, for all of these corporate imperialists that get insanely wealthy off of war. And I know it sounds bad, but that's because it is bad and it's incredibly immoral. But that's what they're about. And we've been knowing that for an incredibly long time. In fact, Dwight D. Eisenhower, a Republican president, warned us of this. He warned us of the military industrial complex. He did. And seemingly nobody listened to him. Or maybe they did and they just decided to do the opposite of what he said. And Joe Biden ends by saying, I don't know how we pull out without chaos ensuing. And he's completely correct there. I mean, whether we would have put out 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 10 years ago, I mean, the same thing would have happened. I mean, you can't stop that. No one could have predicted that the Taliban would have taken over however many cities they did in, what was it, like 11 days or something. I mean, who predicted that? And all the CIA, the intelligence agencies or whatever, whoever it is behind the scenes saying that they warned Biden of this. No, they didn't. This is mainstream media. And I have to tell you, history will judge this kindly, in the sense that history will look at pulling out of Afghanistan as a good thing, the same way that we did Vietnam.